Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you're all keeping well. So before we start the video, I just want to apologise for looking pale and pasty and basically looking ugh, because to be honest, I feel ugh. I'm not ill or anything like that. It's my anxiety is up a little bit and I don't know why, which makes it worse because you can't figure out what's actually caused it. The past 3 days I've just woken up and felt utter shit, to be honest. But the one thing that does help me keep focused, that does help me, is actually researching and recording these history videos. And also I have my little craft room, which is just over the other side, and that is my little safe place. That is my safe haven where I can just sit there and craft. I can just, yeah, it keeps my mind focused instead of having those negative thoughts that can sometimes dwindle their way in, which when they get in, it's not nice and it is hard to get rid of them. So I just want to say, if you are struggling, if you are suffering at the moment, I just want to say you're not alone, and I just want to give you all a big hug, and it will get better. It's hard to see it at the moment, but we will pull through it. So anyway, let's get on with the video. So last week's video was the Henry's invasion of Ireland, and if you haven't seen that yet, I will link that somewhere for you to go and find. But for this week, it's not so much on Henry. Henry is involved, but it's not all on him. Today's video is all about Thomas Becket. It is time for the man to have his own video. Now, obviously, everyone knows what happened to Thomas Becket, and it is the 12th century. There was a lot of violence and blood and gore. So please do expect that within this video, and just be mindful if there are younger ears listening. So let's get into the video. Thomas Becket was born around 1118 in London, and he was born to Gilbert and Matilda, who were both immigrants from Normandy. Now, Thomas's father, Gilbert, he was a well-connected merchant, and he then went on to rent out properties. Now, there's a legend about Thomas's mother, Matilda, that said that she was a Saracen princess, but I have no idea where that has come from, which is really annoying. Now, the Beckett's family, they weren't overly wealthy or powerful, but they were comfortable. Now, Thomas, he grew up in Cheapside, and he was sent to school at Merton Priory, and his education in England finished when he was around 16. He then went to Paris to study, which was possibly the arts, and for some unknown reason, sorry, my cat's just come in. For some unknown reason, he dropped out and he returned to London, and it appeared that he took a year out. Now, Thomas's father's income was beginning to dwindle, so Thomas, he got himself a job as an accountant for a London financier for a couple of years. Thomas, he then gained employment through his father's friends as a clerk for Theobald, Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, Thomas, he was described as being intelligent and charming and authoritative, and he was good with dealing with negotiations. Thomas, he was later recognised for his talents by Theobald, who had suggested to King Henry II in 1155 that he should appoint Becket as his new chancellor. Henry did just that, and Thomas and Henry became close friends. They would go hunting together, travel around England together, they would play games. Thomas, he was loving his new position within the royal court. It was said that he enjoyed his new wealth and he threw lavish parties. He liked to decorate his many new residences with beautiful furnishings. But Becket, he was always reminded where he came from those who were jealous of his sudden rise at the court. After the death of Theobald, Archbishop of Canterbury, the position became available. Now, against advice from many, including his own mother, Empress Matilda, Henry put forward for his friend Thomas Becket for the position. Now, Becket, he objected to the position as Thomas, well, for one, he wasn't a priest, and he was also quite the unlikely candidate. But Henry, he wanted control of the church and he wanted someone he could manipulate and use to be the new archbishop. Henry also wanted Thomas to continue being his chancellor. So Thomas Becket was appointed Archbishop on the 2nd of June 1162 and he was consecrated on the 3rd of June. And almost overnight, Becket changed. He became every bit the religious and pious archbishop. He then began distancing himself from royal policy. He went back on Henry's wishes and resigned as chancellor, stating that he wasn't fit for both positions. Becket became disagreeable and very stubborn. He began fighting over church lands with barons and magnates, all while a wedge was growing between his and Henry's friendship, and it would only continue to deteriorate. Many arguments, loud and public arguments, erupted between the two men over the decision of power between crown and church. Henry had wanted to implement the Constitution of Clarendon in 1164. These laws would allow for church clerks to be tried and punished for crimes such as murder and rape by royal law instead of church law. Becket, he resisted these new laws. He stated that the independence of the church would be at risk. More arguments ensued between the two men and things got so bad that Henry pulled out his son and heir, young Henry, out of Thomas's residence where he was being educated. Henry then began confiscating his former friend's properties. In October 1164, Henry had Thomas summoned to appear before the King's Council. A council was made up of barons and bishops, and Becket was put on trial for corruption, embezzlement, and misconduct in public. Becket was completely unprepared for any of the questions that was threw at him. Over 6 days, the trial continued until the jury passed their sentence, which unfortunately the records aren't very clear. Now, Thomas wasn't thrown into a dungeon the moment his sentence was passed. He actually went back to his palace in Northampton. It was from there in the very early hours that he and 3 companions dressed themselves as monks and they fled. They were on the run for 2 weeks, travelling only by night. On the 2nd of November, they got themselves to Sandwich in Kent, where Becket got on a boat and sailed for France, where he sought refuge. Thomas Becket, he was in exile and he remained in France for 5 years. Now, back in England, his former friend, King Henry, continued to flex his power. Henry had his son, young Henry, crowned as co-king in July 1170 by the Archbishop of York. Now, when the news reached Becket, he was furious. Only an Archbishop of Canterbury could anoint a king. Becket appealed to the Pope, and Becket returned to England on the 30th of November 1170. Now, contemporary reports said that he was greeted on his return by cheering crowds. On Becket's person was 3 letters excommunicating the Archbishop of York and 2 further bishops from the church. On Christmas Day, Thomas Becket was at Canterbury Cathedral and he excommunicated almost everyone he could remember who he believed had done him wrong. He announced those severe sentences to those involved in the coronation of the young king. Now, Becket's slandering, it soon reached King Henry, who was holding his Christmas court in Normandy. Henry was outraged, and it was there where he said those famous words that are now, well, infamous to history. Quote, "What miserable drones and creators have I nurtured and promoted in my household, who let their lord be treated with such shameful contempt by a low-born clerk." Now, this has often been changed to, "Would no one rid me of this troublesome priest?" So, at Henry's court were 4 knights: Reginald Fitzhurst, William de Tracy, Hugh de Morville, and Richard Brito. They were all prompted by their king's furious outburst. They travelled to Canterbury ahead of a few men that Henry had instructed to travel to England and to reason with Becket and arrest him if necessary. Those 4 knights arrived at Canterbury Cathedral on the 29th of December. Now, one eyewitness account from a man named Edward Grimm. Now, Edward Grimm was so close to the skirmish of Thomas Becket that he was actually wounded by one of the knights' swords. Edward Grimm says that Becket was in the Archbishop's palace when the knights arrived. They made an attempt to arrest him, but Becket, he refused. He actually argued with the knights, and Becket was persuaded to take refuge within the church that was actually meant to be sanctuary. Now, those knights, well, they pursued him. They didn't care about sanctuary. and they tried to manhandle him, and they tried dragging him out of the church and take him away. But Becket, he was resistant, and he actually held on to one of the pillars in the cathedral, preventing them to take him. Now, at that point, one of the knights raised his sword for the first time and brought it down on the top of Becket's head. Then suddenly all the other knights start attacking Becket. They are blowing him with their swords. The monks, they all fled, and then the final blow came from Richard Brito, who ran his sword through Becket. The top of Becket's head had been sliced off, revealing his brain. Now, a fifth man named Hugh de Horsey had, quote, put his foot in the neck of the holy priest and precious martyr, and, horrible to say, scattered the brains with the blood over the pavement. De Horsey said, let us go, knights. This fellow will not get up again. After the brutal murder, chaos erupted to those present. They didn't know what to do next. And for several hours, Thomas Becket's body remained where he had fallen. A few individuals had begun dipping parts of their clothes into the spilled blood or collecting it in small vessels. Thomas Becket, he was buried the next day by the monks in the crypt. Now, almost immediately, there was reports of miraculous healings connected to Becket. Now, the monks, they opened the crypt to the cathedral so pilgrims could visit his tomb, and extraordinary waves of miracles were being recorded. And in recognition of this, Thomas Becket was canonized on the 21st of February 1173. Now, Thomas's canonization, being word, was one of the fastest in history. The word quickly spread of Becket being a miracle-working saint. People from all over Europe began flocking into Canterbury Cathedral in the hope of being healed. Pilgrims could also purchase a mixture of his blood and water, and the mixture was being called St. Thomas's water, which was bottled and sold by the ever opportunistic monks in small lead vessels that was known as ampulla. I think that's right. Now, Becket's death and subsequent miracles had transformed Canterbury Cathedral into one of the most important pilgrimage destinations in Europe. Thomas Becket's body was moved in 1220 from the crypt into a new shrine in a purpose-built chapel within the cathedral. Thomas Becket had remained as a figure of opposition to unbridled power, and he became seen as a defender of the rights of the church. Now, images of his murder can be found in churches across Europe, including Germany and Spain. His relics at Canterbury were visited by people from all over the continent, until his shrine was destroyed by King Henry VIII in 1538. And there we are. That's Thomas Becket's story. And if you visit Canterbury Cathedral, which if you haven't, and if you are able to, I really strongly suggest you do. It is a magnificent building. The architecture is just, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And when you go in the cathedral, you go at the back, and all there is now is a little plaque, which now says this was where Thomas Becket once laid, where he was put to rest. And that's all there is remaining, thanks to good old Henry VIII. I know I love the man, I do, but he had his faults. But anyway, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for listening to my ramblings at the beginning of the video. And I will get through that. I will get better. I usually do. It takes a little while, but like I say, we all get through in the end. We just need to do things that help us. Like I said, for me, is doing the research and filming and being in my craft room and my fur babies. My cats are my world. They do help me no matter what anyone says. I'm sorry, but animals are perfect therapy. So if you have animals, then just let them give you love them, and take your dog out for a walk if you have dogs, obviously if it's not too hot. So, and just do what helps you. And if you're finding that I know this is going to sound really stupid, I can't say you're new to anxiety, but if you suddenly found yourself struggling with anxiety when you've never had it before, it takes time to find out what actually helps you, what helps you focus and not let it overwhelm you. It does take time, and once you find it, it will help. But like I said, if you are struggling, I am all sending you a really big hug, and we will all get there. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please do continue all of your support, because it's just wonderful. And please do keep liking and sharing and subscribing so you don't miss any future videos, because there's still a lot more on Henry II to come. So, but thank you so much for watching, and you're all wonderful. Thank you so much. Look after yourselves, and I see you all soon. Take care.